Jen, and I'm a student here at Purdue, and I'm here with guest professor, Professor Lumpkis today, and he will be sharing his experiences as a professor at Purdue, as well as his experiences outside of Purdue. So, Professor Lumpkis, thank you for coming today. We're just going to start off with basic introductions. So, could you tell us a little bit about where you're from and where you have lived, and even like where you've been?
Sure. So I probably somewhat maybe not the typical person anymore. I pretty much stayed in the Midwest. I was born in West Chicago, moved when I was 2 years old to Wisconsin. That's more or less where I grew up, and on a small dairy farm, and never thought I would ever be a professor. And here I am being interviewed, and it's been an interesting road. But I did my schooling in Michigan for my undergrad and master's, and then went back to Madison for my PhD, and now I'm at Purdue. So this is my third Big Ten school. I've enjoyed them.
Nice. So what do you exactly teach, and how did you get interested in these subjects?
So my story is very different. I don't know if we've talked about that before. So my grandparents only did grammar school. My parents did high school and wanted the kids to go to college. They thought it was important, but they were all expecting a bachelor's degree. I mean, that was the case. And I thought I would go get a job, maybe in the auto industry or something. And in college, I started running track and field. And my senior year, I won Division III Nationals, and it was pretty close to qualifying for the Olympic trials. And so my coach said, "Why don't you think about training for the Olympic trials?" And I'm like, "Okay, I guess I could. I'll take a year off."
Sure.
My fiance at that point was a year behind me. And he said, "You should go train at the University of Michigan because they have some post-collegiates there." And I was at Calvin College, so we would drive down there once a week. I met the coach and the team. He's like, "Why don't you just come to grad school, and then you can live down here and train?" And I'm like, "Okay." So I applied to grad school and got in, and the only way I could get funding was to be a TA. And I was petrified my first day. I remember going in there. I was only like 2 years older than most of my students, and I had 60 to 70 students in statics, equivalent to our ME 270. And I'm sure I hope I improved a lot, but I know that first day I was just petrified. Like, what am I going to say? Am I going to run out of material? But as the semester went on, I'm like, I actually really enjoy this. And so by the time I got with my master's, I'm like, I actually could see teaching. So my motive was never to go into academia or to be a teacher, but here I am, and I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I guess from the college you attended, what was your favorite experience? I mean, I guess even from Wisconsin first.
My first college was Calvin College in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And probably when I look back, my favorite thing was cross country and track. And it doesn't have to be sports, but getting part of a small club where you really get to know the people. Mm-hmm. And in distance running, you spend 2 hours a day just running with people and talking. And so those are the people that we still stay in contact from my college years. I met my wife there, so that was added bonus. Yes, and but so I tell people, even when they come to a place like Purdue, try to find something that makes it small. Find a club or some activity that you're really passionate about, that you like to do, that you kind of get that support network. Mm-hmm. And for me, cross country and track was that way.
Okay. One thing we always like to ask, what is the biggest thing you've learned from college, either one or any of your academic experience before you started teaching?
Yeah. If I look back, and the class stuff is, and I tell our students now, and you probably hear that from other professors, it's important to master the material in the class, and that's kind of enforced for those you don't pass the class. But there's so many other things going on at colleges, so for example, we got to know each other through the Africa projects. Right. And I enjoy doing projects like that because it teaches a different set of skills that are very important for leadership, for life skills, for lifelong learning. Mm-hmm. But they build on the technical skills. If all you do is go to classes, you never get involved, and you don't have those experiences, I think you're missing the live college experience. To me, that kind of differentiates some of the things we do with online classes only versus actually being on a campus university where there's research opportunities, club activities, and so forth.
So with good experiences and lessons, there always comes failures. What would you say was your biggest mistake, or maybe something you wish you could have gone back and changed during your academic career? Yeah,
that's a good question. So I was thinking about that when I saw the list of questions, and probably what I tell my students, and I see the same thing. Part of it, I was the stereotypical engineer. I was very much an introvert, did not want to go make contact. And so I never remember a time I went to a professor's office hours or met a professor outside of class in my undergrad. And looking back, knowing now from my side of the table, I like when students want to come and they want to learn and they ask questions and they're trying to get the material. if I would go back, I'd probably apologize to some of my professors I had. I wish I would have taken advantage of some of your other times that you had. And so I encourage the students here to come, visit. We like to have students try to learn the material and learn about what they're doing and what gets them excited.
Yeah. So when you do interact with students, for the kids who do come in and talk to you during office hours, how do you hope they perceive you as a professor? Because we sometimes are scared. We don't want to seem like annoying. You could be having lunch or doing your own work, and we don't want to be in your schedule. So.
Yeah, and sometimes we get busy, so I do have to watch that they can tell that I'm distracted or I'm trying to finish that email or I got some other call coming in. But for me, the fun part is getting to know the students outside of just the class. So I work at trying to get to know the names in my classes and try to get those. But traveling with students, right, is a very different experience, and so you get to see your professor, and I get to see the students differently. And I think ultimately it comes down is the professor isn't that different than someone else. This is just what I'm doing for my career right now. Right. But we have normal lives. We have families. We make mistakes. Our kids yell and scream the same as everyone else's kids, and so I think that's the fun part. So we have a lot of college kids out to our house. And at first they come out, so Dr. Lumpkin, they're kind of shy, and then they meet my wife, and she makes up for that. And soon thing, but it happens. I noticed the academic environment. So one of my first trips here, I did a China trip, study abroad, and I got to know the students really well because you're with them for 3 weeks. And I didn't see the students the rest of the summer. I came back, and one of the young ladies on the trip saw me in the hallway, and she ran up and just gave me a big hug and said, "Oh, Dr. Lumpkin, you're back." And all the other students were like, "What's going on here?" So it's a different kind of. You see the professor outside the classroom. We see the students outside of the classroom versus the academic environment, where if you just go to class, you really miss out on getting to know people.
Yeah. I guess, what is your proudest accomplishment while you were in college?
While I was in college, I feel that I should say I met my wife and married her. And,
that's so nice.
Coming up on 25 years, but there's a lot of things. Probably running for me was a big one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I ended up being able to go to the Olympic trials in '96, and but looking back, I think most of those things are accomplishments and awards, but it's really the people that you meet. For me, in my case, running, it was the friends that I got to meet and the memories of traveling around the country, going to different races, more so than ultimately which ones I won or I lost. So it's hard to pin one thing down. Yeah,
having accomplished so much, especially with not only being like in academics, but also being pretty good athletically too. What would you say is like a trait that has kind of pushed you to do so well in both things that maybe you see in your own students today?
Yeah, I'm competitive, but in a little different. People wouldn't necessarily. I'm internally competitive, so I really beat myself up sometimes if I don't do well. And that's where distance running is kind of good. It's very much a team sport, which you love to do.
Right.
But ultimately, you got to push yourself through something to do that. And so it's the same with teaching or anything else I do. I wouldn't necessarily, I'm a perfectionist, but I like to do well, and part of it's because I think it's something we should do. So if I'm going to be a professor and teach, I should work at doing that well. And I think that's a good role model for the students. Right now, you're called to be a student. You should work hard and try to be a good student. And same thing in industry and working, and so I think there's a lot of aspects to answer that one.
Okay. What is your, I guess the last question is, so you did talk about like student involvement with clubs and professors, and of course being hardworking is a good trait to see within students. What would you say would be like maybe 2 other traits that you would look for in a good student that you would see as someone who has potential like down the road in their careers?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's probably, I could maybe list off things that I don't want to see in students sometimes
that
too, but no, I don't do that. But because every student is so different. So when I look back, I'm very careful when I talk. I don't have, I would seldom say that was my best student ever in any case. Students are very different. I would say that this student was extremely gifted in this area, worked very hard. But sometimes I would rather have a student that maybe struggles to learn the material but really works hard to learn it, and then they actually get through the material and can apply it differently than maybe someone that just comes easy but really doesn't work hard or apply themselves. Right. But it's the whole personality thing. I would say, do they really like learning and do they want to learn? But that shows up differently too. Someone could be an introvert and really like learning, but you don't see it visibly. So as I try to get the students, there's certain students that are just engaged with other people. I mean, it's fun for me to see freshmen come in, especially if I get to work with them all 4 years and I do academic advising.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time they're a senior, the progression. So I think it's the
Mm-hmm.
whatever traits you want to pin that down to, it's taking advantage of what college offers, being able to take some risks, and actually kind of grow up. You know, you're learning the technical skills, but you're learning so much more. And so I would say the students I really enjoy working with, and I would say are the ones that kind of have that ability to take that kind of risk, get to know people, do some
Mm-hmm.
different things, get involved. You could answer that it comes down to time management or comes down to work ethic, but I think that it's all kind of a package together.
Okay. We've talked a lot about like work-life balance. So what would
Yeah.
you say, like even outside of being a professor, what are hobbies that you still do? Do you still run?
I'm trying to get back to running again,
Okay.
so I do like to stay active, so I cut and burn on my own wood for firewood. And,
Yeah.
I tell generally students if you put an engine on something and it moves, I enjoy it. If it's a bigger engine, I enjoy it more. It's anything from cars, and we've had boats, and I fly airplanes, so I'm trying to build an airplane in my basement. That kind of stalled, so I'm a
Cool
pilot.
hobby.
We live out on an airstrip, so I give a lot of my students, if they come out to their house, airplane rides. And so it's hard. Sometimes my wife complains that my hobbies and my work are the same thing, because it's like designing the utility vehicles for Africa. Those are things I like to do anyways.
Right.
Probably the biggest challenge I do have is Purdue has so many opportunities. So it's kind of like being a student. When I talked about students getting involved, I have to do the same thing, but I also have to caution it because I can't bring work home every night. I mean, a lot of times I'm back home at night working on emails, and it's a job that you never can leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when I'm traveling, it's always trying to get the emails answered, trying to get the grants in, trying to get the reports done. And so for me, it's as important to carve out time that I have with my family to do
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and the hobbies are a good way to do that. So my daughter and wife just got a horse, and so now we're into horses and chickens, and it seems like there's always some adventure going on at the Lumpkins family house, and so that's kind of fun, and it keeps me grounded in what's important in life.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have today. So thank you for coming, and thank you for watching.